My name's Edwina Hayward. I work for BMT HiQ Sigma. I've worked for BMT since 2000. I work mainly in the defence area, mostly for MOD projects in the land and naval environment. I've done a lot of work in risk management, both setting up risk management processes and doing an awful lot of risk analysis as well, which has fed main gate business cases and led to decisions on projects going forward or not. I'm a member of the APM Risk SIG Committee. So what am I going to talk about? A bit of a definition of risk, the difference between uncertainty, risk and issue, risk management in terms of project control system, and the risk process. So firstly, definition of risk. So a risk is defined as an uncertain event that, should it occur, will have a positive or a negative impact on your objectives. So a positive outcome is an opportunity and a negative is a threat, although we generally talk about risks in the negative point of view. So risk can be described in terms of a cause, an effect and a consequence. I'll come on to those a little bit later. It has a probability of occurrence, because it might or might not happen, and the impact can be described in terms of cost, time, performance and other areas. Reputation is quite a big one that's often used as well. So the difference between uncertainty, risk and issues is where people get very confused. So if we think about a journey to work, the uncertainty on your daily travel is it normally takes you, say, 45 minutes to get to work. If the traffic's not too bad, it can take you as little as 35 minutes. And if the traffic's a bit heavier, or as always happens to me, it seems, you hit every red light as you go through the traffic lights, it takes you a bit longer. It can take you up to an hour and 5 minutes. So the uncertainty on your journey to work is you've got a minimum of 35 minutes, and most likely of 45 minutes, and a maximum of an hour and 5 minutes. So that's your uncertainty on your journey to work. An issue is something that you just have to deal with. It's 100% certain. So possible issues on Penny's journey to work in this case: roadworks, you know about them because you've had signs up for a while, that you just have to deal with it. You know it's going to take you longer. Weather conditions, rainy days, always takes longer to get to work. And traffic jams is another issue. You just have to deal with it when you hit a traffic jam. Although one of your options there might be to take an alternative route, but that will possibly take you longer as well. So I think we've now talked about uncertainty. That's just, it might take you a bit shorter, a bit longer time. We've got some issues we might just have to deal with, but what about the risks? So the risks to the journey to work are you might have a breakdown, and there's a number of causes. It might be a flat tyre, it might be you run out of fuel, or it might be that your engine overheats. But they all lead to the same breakdown. So the effect is that you might be late for work, or in fact you might miss work altogether. But what can you do about it? So one of the things we want to do is try and mitigate that risk. So we're trying to reduce either the probability of it happening or the impact should it occur. One thing we can do is regularly maintain our cars. Always walk around the car first thing in the morning and check your tyres to make sure you haven't got a slow puncture. But we should also consider fallback options. So if the risk does happen, we can still do something to reduce the impact to us. So a fallback option is to make sure we've got a spare tyre in the car, so we can change it if we have a flat tyre, or we could have AA or RAC cover. So if we break down, we've got somebody to call out, which will reduce that time impact on us. Another potential risk is an accident. So this could be caused by, again, a number of options: driving too closely to the cars in front, being distracted, changing the CD or the radio or answering your phones. Again, we've got the same effect, that we're late for work or we might miss it. And again, we need to consider what the mitigations are and the fallback. So mitigations is to always keep your distance. Don't drive when you're tired. Don't change the radio station. And our fallback option is that we all have car insurance. So the impact of an accident, if we didn't have car insurance, would be a huge cost to us to repair. But because we've got car insurance, we don't have such a big cost impact. So does that make sense now? Difference between uncertainty, risks and issues. In terms of a project control system, risk management features in the middle of it, really. We've got establishing our baselines, our planning and scheduling, understanding the objectives. We manage and control our work as we go through the project, and we've got some change in there as well. But throughout this, we need to understand and manage our risks. Oh, not very good, you can't see the last box. But this is the standard risk management process, following 4 steps. And they are identify, assess or analyse, plan and manage. This is a process that you follow throughout the project life cycle, and there's, can't see them very well, but there's arrows going back. So as we go through step by step, we then go back. Once we've start managing our risks, we look to identify new ones. So to identify risks, we firstly look at our objectives. So what are we trying to achieve in our project? The risks are those things that will stop us achieving those objectives. We need to understand what the effect is. Failing to achieve our objectives, and that's cost, time or performance, or a combination of all of them. And that should help us identify our current scores. So we need to understand our causes, and by identifying the causes of our risks, we can help identify the mitigation actions that will help us reduce our risk. I said there that risks are identified throughout the project life cycle. Moving on to assess or analyse, we need to understand what kind of effect our risk will have. There's a probability associated with a risk, so it might or might not happen, a 1 in 4 chance. But from our first initial identifying of our risks, we look at, in terms of a first pass, is it a very high impact, a very high probability, through to very low. But that's okay as a first initial start, but we need to try and put some figures to that. So we score risks in terms of a percentage chance for the probability. So we think there's a 1 in 4 chance of happening, so we've got a 25% probability for that risk at the current score. So as we stand today, if we do nothing else, what do we think our chance of that risk happening is? We need to identify our impacts in terms of time, cost and performance. So we normally work on working days that we could be delayed, or the pounds it will cost us. This enables us to prioritise our risks. So we've got, in terms of a probability and impact, we multiply the two together to give us something like this, which means that our risks that have a high probability and a high impact, which sit in the top right-hand corner, those are the risks that we really need to concentrate on, because those are the risks that will hurt us and stop us meeting our objectives. We score risks in terms of our current score and once we've done our mitigating actions. So we should understand as we've started to mitigate our risks, we should move from the top right-hand corner towards the bottom left-hand corner of this grid. So we need to plan to understand what we're going to do about our risks. We've got a high-level strategy, so this is in terms of what we think we're going to do. We normally refer to the 4 T's. We can tolerate our risk, i.e. accept it. There are some risks that we can't really do anything about it, so we might just have to accept that it might happen and we'll have to deal with the consequences. It might be that it would cost us too much to do anything about it, so again we would accept that it's a potential risk to our objectives. We can transfer, so in terms of getting a partner, you can transfer the risk to them. From a client point of view, you might place a contract, you transfer some of your risk to your industry partner, so it takes it away from you. Or we can treat our risks, which is generally what we want to do because we want to try and reduce them. Now normally we can only reduce the impact or the probability. There's not very often many actions that you can do to reduce both. Another thing is to terminate or avoid. This is, we don't very often use that one. The treat or transfer or tolerate ones are the ones that we tend to use. So from understanding what we think we might do at that strategic level about our risk, we need to then identify lower level actions. So these are activities that we're going to carry out to try and reduce our risk, or in terms of an opportunity, we need to do something to make sure that opportunity happens. Again, it will cost us money perhaps to implement something to exploit that opportunity, but in the long term we're going to be better off for doing it. These activities, to tie it back into what we're doing from a project controls point of view, we need to make sure we've scheduled so that we can monitor progress. We've got a resource and a budget associated with it, and we can track how we're doing, so we can identify how we're getting towards our post-mitigated or target position. We also need to identify fallback actions or plans. So this is to, if the risk does occur, although we've done all that we can, is there anything else that we can reduce the impact? So going back to the example of going our journey to work, our fallback plan was to have our AA cover, so that even though we've broken down, we can still call the AA man out to help us and still get us to work. It's not always easy to do, to get fallback plans for all risks. So manage. We've identified our risk actions. We've scheduled them into the program schedule. We've associated an owner, a resource to it, and now we need to monitor. We need to make sure that we're progressing them as we would any other schedule activity. We should have regular reviews to make sure that how we're doing against those activities. So from our current score, we should look at how are we getting towards our target score. As we move throughout the project life cycle, from our initial scores, we should reduce over time. As activities are completed successfully, hopefully, although some aren't, we should reduce our current score. So over time, our risk exposure is getting less. So going back to our original diagram of the 4 steps, we've got to our manage stage. Now we're going back and we can start identifying new risks that might occur. We might have closed out a risk because we've completed all our activities and we've reduced it to nothing, but in the meantime we've identified a new risk. So this is a continuous process throughout the project life cycle. The current scores that we have, I wasn't going to put this in the slides, but I've talked too quickly. So we can use our risk information, our probabilities, and our impacts, and we can do some Monte Carlo simulation, and we can identify what our risk exposure is, and also what we should hold in our risk pot. So this should be identified at the beginning of the programme, and it should, as we move throughout, we should continually do risk analysis as well. And this comes as part of this managing the risk pot and managing the risk process. As we get to, we should understand from our current scores, and also as we manage our risks, we should head towards our target scores, but we will always end up with a risk exposure. But as long as that's understood at the beginning of the programme and it's a decision, then it's part of the context of the project. Not sure I've got much else to say. So are there any questions? Does that all make sense? It's a very simplistic view. No questions? Everybody's desperate for lunch. Okay, if there are no questions, then I guess it's lunchtime.